I'm your host, Chuck Lee, and as usual on this beautiful March 9th, 1997, we're coming to you live from the downtown Eau Claire Tire Factory and Carp Sausage Factory, thanks to Fred the True Stafford. And with me, as usual, is my rusty, trusty sidekick, Fred the True Stafford.
Hello there, Chuck. How are you?
Glad to see that you could make it tonight, Fred.
Yes.
I noticed you were just barely dragging in there, just
In the head of
right underneath the wire again. So glad to see that you're with us tonight.
Yes.
And let's talk to is Larry Klayman from Judicial Watch. They were depositions of George Stephanopoulos today, and then there was something else that happened over the weekend that could possibly have moved everything up onto the front burner or moved it off the front burner, but the death of Whitewater partner Jim McDougal,
Yes.
dying in prison on Sunday. And you know, I was watching the 5:30 national news Sunday evening, Fred, 5 or 5:30. And the reporter that came on there to report on what was the top story of the evening said it was the storm coming in from the west was the top story.
Yes.
And the death of Jim McDougal was way down third or fourth on her list of
Yes.
important issues for the day. Well, in reality, I think the death of Whitewater partner Jim McDougal dying in prison should have been the #1 reason all across the country on every newscast, because this is very important news. Jim McDougal had, in the last few months before he died, started giving testimony stating that the Clintons were involved in some illegal dealings down in Arkansas when Bill Clinton was the governor of Arkansas, and when Hillary Clinton was a lawyer at the Rose Law Firm. James McDougal was the head of a savings loan, the Madison Guarantee Savings and Loan, which failed and cost the taxpayers about $60 million. Well, a lot of that money has never been tracked down or where it's went to. And the untimely and unfortunate and possibly suspicious death of James McDougal right here at this time in our history is something of very serious importance. And Fred, you knew Jim McDougal back when you were down in Arkansas back in the old days. What did you think about him?
I didn't know
Oh. I thought you said you met him once when you were down in Little Rock.
No, I'd never been in Little Rock in my life.
Okay, I was just checking there. We finally got a monitor now so we can see how we look there, and of course Fred doesn't have his hat on today. Now Fred, a lot of people have been calling into the program, and in a minute here we're going to get a camera on you, and while they're on you reading one of your news reports, I'm going to make a phone call here and see if we can get through to
All right.
to
Larry Klayman.
to Mr. Klayman, head of Judicial Watch. But Fred, a lot of people have called in and wrote email to the email address, and that's cows at discover-net.net. That's the email address.
Yes.
And they've wrote and they said, exactly what do you put in the carp sausage that you're selling around town?
I don't sell it. I don't make carp sausage. Don't have anything to do with it.
Because I ate it that one time and tasted it, and you know, it tasted
Good. If you ate it, I know where you got it, but I'm glad you liked it.
You know, when I tasted it, and I gave a little bit of it to Roy, we both agreed it tastes just like chicken.
Yes.
We don't know what you're using over there, but...
I'm not using anything. I'm not making it.
And then this letter here is from Sally. It says, Dear Fred, how do you lift those 50-pound dead carp up from the river and drag them up to the tire factory to grind them up and make them into sausage?
I don't.
Well, this is just one of your one of our viewers
Yes,
wanted to know that.
Yes, but I don't fish. I don't pick up carp. I don't have anything to do with fishing.
Huh. Well, for somebody that has a multi-million-dollar carp sausage factory,
I don't have any multi-million-dollar or even 1 cent carp sausage.
factory.
Right.
All right. Okay, there, Roy. You get the master running there on time. Okay, we got everything.
Going to make your call now?
Okay, Fred, what do you got there that you're going to read here? And while you're reading that, we're going to make we're on the wrong camera there, Roy. You need to get on Freddie boy.
Puerto Rican statehood.
There you are.
The Path to Disunion by Patrick J. Bushman. No, Buchanan, that is. A National Wonder from the 12th of March. And this bill that is presently in the House of Representatives, they're trying to promote statehood for that. And it's 60% of the people are on welfare. It doesn't sound like anything that we want to have anything to do with it. We also have another something here from Joseph Sobrand's column in the Washington Watch. The Washington smear campaign against Kenneth Starr with the help of the news media has been remarkably successful. First, Starr was to blame for all the leaks coming out of the investigation. Next, she was out of control. Prisoner subpoena to Monica's mom. When he tossed out the Hatchet man, he issued one to Hatchet man Sidney Blumenthal. He also became a threat to the First Amendment soon. No doubt
Larry?
He will be blamed for the
Yeah, that's Chuck Lee in Eau Claire.
for the
Okay, you ready to
death
go on?
of Vincent Foster.
About 35 minutes. Okay, hang on. Okay, can you hear us, Larry?
Hello?
All right. Okay, well, we finally got through to Larry Klayman, the head of the Chief Counsel and the founder of Judicial Watch.
Yes.
And Judicial Watch is fighting to uncover government corruption and uphold justice. And right now, at least as of Friday, when I talked to Larry's personal secretary, she was telling me that Larry is involved in Judicial Watch, not only Larry, but Judicial Watch is involved in over 14 cases dealing with corruption within the Clinton administration. First of all, we wanted to let you know that Judicial Watch is a volunteer organization made up of lawyers, investigators, and concerned citizens based in Washington, D.C. And it's a 501c3 tax-deductible corporation. And it costs a lot of money to do what Larry and Judicial Watch are doing, but somebody has to do it because it seems like Larry is the one and Judicial Watch is the one entity out there that has been able to pull this whole thing together, this great big rat's nest, I would call it, of all these loose ends and all these different cases and names and all the different stories and everything we've heard for the last 6 or 7 years. Larry's been able to pull it together in a way to where there's been able to be filed class action suits and individual suits pertaining to the Clinton administration and their fraud and corruption within the Clinton administration. So, with me this evening is Larry Klayman. Larry, glad to have you on the program tonight.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Well, we're glad to finally get through to you. And I know when I was talking to your secretary on Friday afternoon, she said that you were about to depose George Stephanopoulos. Did that come off today?
Well, yes, we spent the day with George. He didn't stay as long as the court had ordered him to stay, which is going to be subject to a motion. that we're going to be filing, but we did take the deposition of George Stephanopoulos in the Filegate case.
And was that, you say he didn't stay long, about how long was he underneath?
He was there for about 5 hours of deposition testimony. The court had said at a minimum that we were entitled to 6, but during that period of time it was slow going. George had a very faulty memory, somewhat better than the guard who guarded Princess Diana after the crash, a little facetiously speaking.
Oh, well that's great to hear. Now the Filegate case, Judicial Watch is representing citizens whose FBI files were wrongly accessed, possibly for political espionage purposes, by Bernard Nussbaum, Anthony Marcisa, and Craig.
Right, those are the allegations. The allegations are that FBI files of Reagan and Bush employees and possibly others were improperly provided by the FBI to the White House, we believe, for political espionage purposes. And most recently, there's been reference made by Mr. Stephanopoulos on This Week with Sam Donaldson and Cokie Roberts that White House allies are whispering about an Ellen Romish strategy. This was, of course, a reference to the East German spy who had affairs with President Kennedy and members of Congress during the Kennedy administration. J. Edgar Hoover, then the director of the FBI, had FBI files, and he used them to blackmail both Kennedy and members of Congress. So we have reason to believe, based on Mr. Stephanopoulos' comments, that misuse of FBI files are continuing with regard to, at a minimum, White House allies and possibly the White House.
Well, I think now back when we first heard about the files that came from the FBI offices and came into possession of the White House, it was just a few hundred. Then it seemed to balloon close to 1,000. And I think it was on a report from Matt Drudge or from another group called Conspiracy Nation that it could be as many as 2,000 files were spirited out of FBI headquarters over to the White House and were rifled through by the likes of Craig Livingstone and Bernard Nussbaum, and that possibly that these files were of, like you said earlier, of higher-ups in the Reagan and Bush administration, but also Republican members of Congress and other Republican operatives that could possibly have been, these files could have possibly found incriminating evidence, whereas the holders of the files could be using these in a way of, in a certain type of blackmail against Republican leaders in Congress and in Washington. Is that one of the alleys we seem to be going down?
Well, it's one of them. I frankly think that at the end of the day what we're going to find is that the files that were turned over by the FBI to the White House went beyond 200 initially, went beyond 400, and now we know 900, to be even more than that. And I frankly think that probably the files will show that not just Republicans, but others, anybody that was considered an adversary of this administration was probably within that class of people. As it stands today in terms of Republicans, I don't think, frankly, this White House views Republicans in Congress as a threat. And there were times in the past when they didn't either. Republicans have been relatively docile vis-a-vis what Clinton has done. Even over the weekend, we heard Trent Lott, the majority leader, say that Clinton should effectively be let off the hook, which is simply a censure. So I think it goes beyond that, and this is what we're looking at.
Okay, I don't know if you ever got around to deposing Jim McDougal or ever even got near to working on any of the Whitewater charges that were kind of whirling around him over the years. What's your take on his sudden and untimely death over the weekend?
Well, I think it's probably a disaster for Ken Starr and his investigation of Whitewater. This is why some of the criticism that's been leveled towards Starr is legitimate, in that he has taken a very long time, and this is what happens when your investigation gets elongated. We know that Starr, however decent man he is, however ethical he may be, has not been a full-time special prosecutor, that he was continuing to work for his law firm, and consequently I think that's why these cases are taking longer than they should. And when you do that, key witnesses like Jim McDougal just sometimes die, and he's really left holding the bag. This sends an unfortunate signal to those other witnesses that are out there that they don't have to come forward now, whether it's Susan McDougal or whether it's full cooperation with previous Governor Jim Guy Tucker. McDougal was the only one really that had the ability to testify in a strong way against Clinton. The rest of them, frankly, are probably not going to now that they see that he's dead.
Well, with possibly Starr got some of his testimony sworn, will that be any good now that he's dead?
I doubt that it would be usable, because unless the attorneys for President Clinton or Hillary Rodham Clinton were able to cross-examine Mr. McDougal at the time, then that would not be usable in a court of law against Mr. Clinton or the First Lady.
Now, I see where Susan McDougal was out of the federal prison system for about 3 days for a physical checkup, and she's back in now. And she is just flat out refusing to say anything, and for one reason or another, out of fear or for her life, or fear that she might end up doing a lot heavier time. But she's got some other charges she has to deal with here.
Oh, you can bet your booties that now that her previous husband is dead, she'll be less inclined to talk. This is all why we have so many lawsuits and why we're proceeding so aggressively in a lot of different fronts, is that, quite frankly, the independent counsel has not been as aggressive as he should have been. Congress sits there doing nothing, whether it's the House or the Senate, basically just looking at polls, and now that Clinton's riding high, they're not inclined to even anger the Clinton administration for fear that it will affect their midterm elections. And Janet Reno is stonewalling over at the Justice Department. So it really falls to citizens groups, such as Judicial Watch, to do a much bigger job. And although we don't have the resources that the federal government has, we have to do with what we do have, and to bring private lawsuits when we can and try to uncover the facts. But frankly, the American people have not been well served by the government and by the independent counsel up to this point in time. And let me add, with regard to Lewinsky, we're now 7 weeks into this investigation. Starr has yet to call Lewinsky before the grand jury. He's yet to call President Clinton. And if he had called either of those two during the early days, probably this scandal would be over, because if the president took the Fifth Amendment as a political matter, it would be the Democrats that asked him to leave. And if Lewinsky took the Fifth Amendment, then we'd have our answer too. So I think that some of Senator Lott's criticism about the slowness of Starr's investigations are valid. However, I don't agree with him when he said over the weekend that the president should not be held accountable in impeachment proceedings. Clearly, he should.
Well, I think both the Republicans and Democrats probably would like to get a lot of this behind us now. We're going into the elections are roughly about 8 months away tomorrow. I think it is 8 months. And we're getting to that period now where fundraising has to start again. This has been hanging over the country's head for several years now. Maybe it's just getting to where the Republicans and the Democrats are wore down to the point now where let's cut our losses, let's go with what Starr's got, get his report in writing, let's get it published, get it out there, and be done with it. Is that the way it seems to be unwinding here now?
Well, I think that two things. One, they're playing to public opinion that they want an end to these things because the public wants an end to these things. That tends to influence their thought. And they have reached a frustration with Ken Starr, and they want to see what he's got. But frankly, today was a big loss for Ken Starr, and it does point out why our cases at Judicial Watch take on greater importance, and it should encourage others to come forward and do similar things to try to bring this administration to justice, because unless we set the example, then future generations are going to laugh at the law. During the deposition of George Stephanopoulos today, for instance, he basically, he was extremely rude. He was very, very nasty towards me. His memory was blank on many different occasions. It was quite clear that he wasn't being candid in his testimony. And as long as these people are fail to be held accountable, they think they can come in front of a court of law and simply not tell the truth. Now, in our case, that's not going to be true, because we're going to go down every lead. We're going to question every person that he's talked to. We're going to push for documents that he did not produce, and he left the White House with 3 to 5 boxes of documents that were not produced today. And we're going to push till we get the answer. We're going to be different than Congress was. But these people feel that they can have this kind of arrogant attitude because no one has held them accountable. We intend to hold them accountable.
Now, George made a kind of a half-veiled threat a few weeks ago saying if Clinton goes down, they're going to pull down a lot of other big people with him. Was that just idle chit-chat, or is he actually serious about that?
Well, we asked him today about that. He refused to answer the questions. When claims that he's now a journalist and doesn't have to tell us who he talked to about those threats. But we're going to be going to the court to force him to answer those questions, because if these things are true, and he claims that these things did occur, that people did talk to him about this so-called Ellen Romish strategy, this would be a crime. And he's not entitled to take his reporter's privilege under those circumstances. And besides, he's not a reporter. He's a political pundit. So we will be pursuing this to the very end.
Now, what you deposed today, has that become public right away, or is that...
It is a matter of public record. We have it on video, and it was transcribed.
So you'll be kind of boiling that down a little bit, and...
That's right. We're going to be going back to the court with that. And if anybody would like information about our activities, they can call us at toll-free number 888-JW-ETHIC, E-T-H-I-C, 888-JW-ETHIC, E-T-H-I-C.
And that is your 800 number?
Right, and we have a newsletter. Anybody that wants to call, we'll give them a complimentary copy. They can see what are the different types of cases that we're involved in. As you know, we were also the group that uncovered John Wong and the campaign finance scandal, and we're still pursuing that because Congress isn't doing much, if anything, and certainly Reno's doing almost nothing, even by the admission of the Washington Post.
Roy, I think you got a freeze frame there of John Wong, if you want to bring that up. And we'll get into that now. That's part of the campaign finance scandal. And it was basically Judicial Watch that dug in and started asking the questions about some of the illegal fundraising during the '96 and possibly the earlier presidential elections. And one name seemed to be coming up, and that was a Chinese agent named John Wong, H-U-A-N-G. And it was Judicial Watch's efforts that uncovered the campaign finance scandal to begin with, way before we had Kenneth Starr, and this is probably back when Robert Fisk was still the special prosecutor. But John Wong was one of the 60 or so witnesses that kind of left the country, refused to testify, took the Fifth Amendment, or just basically disappeared. But you managed to get him, depose him too for several hours. And what came out of that deposition?
Well, a lot of different things. I mean, John Wong also did a Mark Furman. His memory went blank. But, you know, people don't realize this, but you can be held accountable for perjury for not remembering things that clearly you should remember. And John Wong testified that he did no fundraising at the Commerce Department, that he kept no records, and in fact now we know that he did fundraising and he did keep records. Many of those records were produced through the Democratic National Committee files. And he testified that he had no involvement with regard to China trips and trade missions and those kinds of things where Clinton administration people and businessmen came into contact with communist Chinese agents. So all of these things were false, and we know that they're false. And we have asked the court to bring John Wong back for a continued deposition. We believe we're going to get a second crack at him. Janet Reno and the Clinton Justice Department doesn't even bother to question him. And no one in the House or in the Senate has tried either. So again, it really comes upon the American people to do these things through creative means. And it was that creative means, our lawsuit against the Commerce Department, that uncovered Wong and uncovered the potential for Chinese espionage and uncovered the campaign finance scandal.
Well, this is one of the early scandals that you guys were working on out through Judicial Watch. And this here broke before Ron Brown's untimely death, but wasn't basically the Commerce Department under the Ron Brown administration, wasn't it basically just a shakedown operation for businessmen that wanted to get involved in commerce with the United States?
Well, exactly. They used taxpayer finance services, and they sold those services, such as seats on trade missions, have the government try to do business for you in exchange for large campaign contributions. That's a crime, because you can't sell what you and I pay for as taxpayers to get political contributions. And we know that on those trade missions, there were a number of things that went on which raised serious questions. Were government people, Clinton people, meeting with communist Chinese agents discussing espionage? Were they compromising U.S. national security secrets? What is all this about? And we really have not gotten to the bottom of it. When Senator Thompson tried to investigate it this fall, he basically bailed out. Congressman Burton, who's doing an investigation in the House, we really don't know what he's doing at this point in time. Frankly, I don't think he's doing much, if anything.
Well, early on now, I remember several years ago when Ron Brown, there was charges against him about making some illegal dealings with some Vietnamese for several $100,000, and that seemed to be the only thing that was coming public here until John Wong came along, and then all of a sudden it looked like Ron Brown was on the verge of being indicted, not only him but possibly his son. And then basically what happened from that point?
Well, what we know is that it was that Ron Brown involvement at the Commerce Department which raised a lot of questions about what was going on there. And it was our lawsuit to find out what was going on there that uncovered Wong in the campaign finance scandal. Now, Brown's son, along with some others, and it's interesting that the people indicted so far in the scandal, all of them, ironically, tend to be either Chinese, Indians, or African Americans. It's quite clear that the Clinton administration, which is so free to accuse others of racism, is in fact holding out as scapegoats everybody except people in their administration to hold accountable for what went on. Surely the people that were indicted deserve to be indicted, although they were pled out to lesser offenses, basically slaps on the wrist. But no one inside the administration, interestingly enough, has been indicted or held accountable for anything. And therefore, it's clearly a whitewash to try to create the appearance that the administration is moving against Chinese and others, when in fact, no one is holding the people who perpetrated these crimes inside the administration accountable.
Now, another person over the weekend named Johnny Chung was charged, and he expected to plead guilty to illegal Clinton funding. Does he tie in at all with John Wong and the Commerce Department and some of these other campaign finance scandals?
Yes, I mean, they're part of a group of Asian Americans that included Wong, that included Charlie Tree, who did business with Communist Chinese and laundered money into Clinton's Legal Defense Fund. They're all part of a group of very bad people who worked with John Wong. They don't represent the Asian American community generally, which is a fine community, but they do represent some really bad people in this administration who worked with them. And these are the people who are being singled out as the only ones who are being prosecuted. They certainly deserve it, as I said, but where are the people who participated in the same schemes that these people are being indicted with? Where's Al Gore, who participated with Maria Shah, who was just indicted with regard to illegal fundraising at a Buddhist temple? Where is Ted Kennedy, Senator Ted Kennedy from Massachusetts, who took money from another group of Asian Americans called the Lums out of Oklahoma? Where is Ted Kennedy, who received money illegally from Ron Brown, an African American? He hasn't been indicted. Where is Christopher Dodd and Don Fowler, the heads of the Democratic National Committee who arranged for a lot of this illegal activity? They haven't been indicted. So, you see, it shows you that there's a type of reverse racism that's going on here, where these people who even the Clinton administration thinks are expendable are indicted, but hey, it's none of the people in their administration that are held accountable.
Well, you know, I've noticed Chris Dodd was, I think, chairman or co-chairman of the Democratic National Committee during a lot of this period, but his name seems to not be coming up as much as you'd expect. It seems like it's being pushed off a little bit on Don Fowler. Is Chris Dodd clean or what?
Well, there's a rule in the Senate, and that is that you don't involve any of your colleagues. It's an unwritten rule that senators and congressmen, they're above the law, and you just don't implicate each other because you're all part of one big Washington club. That's why he's not accountable.
So later on it might be somebody else's turn, and then he might have to cover up for them, whatever.
Right.
Okay, now you on your homepage, which is www.judicialwatch.org, you listed 5 different principal laws that the Clinton administration has where they have possibly violated federal laws. And the first one is the promise of employment or other benefit for political activity. Could you quickly tell us where you think possibly the Clinton administration has violated that law? Is that time?
And here's the misconception, is that this isn't a question of revising the campaign finance laws. This is called bribery. You can't sell what taxpayers pay for, whether it's overnight stays in the White House, whether it's seats on Air Force One, whether it's seats on foreign trade missions under Ron Brown or Mickey Cantor. You can't sell government services in exchange for campaign contributions to a political campaign. That's just obvious. So that is a violation of the public trust, and it's a crime. And that's one of the violations that this Clinton administration has done. It's called bribery.
Okay, another one is under Code, United States Code Title 18, 602, solicitation of political contributions. Whoever being a senator or representative or delegate or resident commissioner, blah, 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 can't solicit contributions. So this is another law that has been violated by the Clinton administration, solicitation of political
Oh,
contributions.
yeah, you can't solicit contributions while you're a government employee. That's true.
Okay, that's part of the Hatch Act, is that?
That's correct.
All right. And then 603 is the place of solicitation. Now, would that be on government property?
Can't do it on government property. Of course, there was a lot of debate over that during the Thompson hearings. But, you know, the real issue here is not where you solicit. I think the American people can understand there are ways to get around that. The issue is that you can't sell government services for campaign contributions. You can't provide influence to people based on how much money they give. You can't provide people access in terms of getting national security passes because they make contributions and thereby possibly compromising national security. All of these things are crimes, and all of these things compromise the interests of the people of the United States.
Well, the next one here, well, going on that, soliciting of political contributions. I mean, Al Gore admitted that he was, and I think Bill Clinton also said that they were both making phone calls out of the White House. That's soliciting of political contributions on government property.
It is, and it's technically a violation, but what I'm saying is that's not the major violation. The major violation is that they were selling policy and access in exchange for campaign contributions. Doesn't matter whether they did it on government premises or did it off the premise, it's still illegal, and that's the bigger crime, not where they did it from. Certainly that's a crime as well, but that's a secondary crime. And in many ways, what difference does it make whether you did it inside the White House or whether you went off the government premises? The fact is, if what you're selling is policy, access, and favors, that's called bribery, and that's the bigger crime.
Okay, and then there was another one, intimidation to secure political contributions. Now, do we have a pattern of intimidation?
Well, there were several people during the campaign finance hearings who said they got calls from Vice President Gore who felt that unless they gave money, they could be retaliated against by the U.S. government. And clearly that's a type of intimidation. That was reported even in the liberal Washington Post.
Now, I wonder if any of this, I guess maybe this probably doesn't have anything to do with it, but like you said, there's been 6-7 weeks now since the Lewinsky thing broke, and that thing has just been kind of spinning out there in the wind. There's no finalization, but that seems to be par for the course. It seems like that's what it's been with every scandal going all the way back to the original Whitewater scandal way back in 93, 94. It seems like every one of these have just hung out there, spun in the wind for a while, gotten their media coverage, and then they've kind of fell away, like Travelgate, Filegate, Whitewater, and now it seems like the campaign finance scandal, the death of Vince Foster, the death of Ron Brown, it's all been put on the back shelf, and we're dealing with this Monica Lewinsky thing is out front now, but that's even getting old. So what's next? I mean, are any of these are we going to see any finalization of any of these cases out there, or is it just going to kind of go away when Clinton leaves office?
Well, I don't know that you're going to see it from Congress. Congress doesn't have the will to do anything. Janet Reno doesn't have the will to do anything. Judicial Watch does have the desire and the will to do something, and we hope that people in the media will as well. But we've got to be candid. In our country today, we face a moral and ethical crisis. The people of this country don't care about ethics. They don't care about the law. Not your listeners, not our supporters, but 70% of the people out there. This country is at the moral and ethical end, in my opinion, unless we reverse the trend quickly. And you need to do little more than to watch the deposition of George Stephanopoulos, to see the arrogance, to see the ability to think that he can evade the legal process by forgetting things which clearly he remembers, to see the wisecrack remarks and the nasty attitude to realize that George Stephanopoulos is only able to do those kinds of things, so he thinks, because he will be held accountable in our case, because society has reached such a low level of ethical and moral understanding and care. In effect, if you simply watch this deposition, you would have a microcosm of what this administration is like in terms of its disrespect and disdain for the law. And in fact, unfortunately, that probably exists at least among 70% of society today.
You know, we had Larry Nichols on this program a few years back, and Larry says that the Clintons have been getting away with this since the late 70s. He says they'll get away with it today and they'll get away with it tomorrow because they've always gotten away with it, and they do not respect the laws of this country or the state of Arkansas, and it's basically whatever they can get away with they're going to because they have their agenda, and Nichols says time and time again he's seen them get away with it, and he says that they will continue to get away with it.
Well, you only get away with it if the American people don't care, and unless the American people start to care, this country's not going to exist much longer.
Okay, now
And that's the wake-up call.
Now, Judicial Watch is a 501c3, so people can donate as much money as they want.
It's a tax-deductible contribution. If they want to send contributions, it can be sent to Post Office Box 44444, that's 5 4s, Washington, D.C., 20026. Post Office Box 444, Washington, D.C., 20026. This is an expensive proposition. We've taken over 40 depositions in our various cases against the Clinton administration so far. Each one costs us about $10,000, and one of the reasons I sound so tired is that I've been working for about the past 2 months without even a day off, and to prepare for Stephanopoulos took us virtually a solid week. So this is the kind of thing that a small organization like Judicial Watch, we have to devote a lot of time, and we're doing it, frankly, because no one else is out there doing it.
Besides your work with taking depositions and your legal work, you've had a little bit of time to be on Politically Incorrect. I saw that program the other night. CNN's Talkback Live, Crossfire, MSNBC with Charles Grodin. I saw that one. I mean, that Grodin is about the most liberal, democratic, biased person out there. I don't know how you were able to get in a word edgewise, but you got a few of your points across in there. He didn't. I don't think he liked it. He tried to cut you off a few times. And that Politically Incorrect wasn't much better. I think you were ganged up on that program a little bit.
Well, you know, there aren't that many conservatives out there that are able to speak up, and when we do appear in these shows, frequently it's with regard, or we're there with 3 liberals. But I can hold my own, and there are enough people in this country, and one of the things I said on Politically Incorrect is that it's always been the minority that makes change, whether it was during 1776 or whether it's now. It's the people that feel strongly about things, and numbers are not what counts. You remember those old Batman movies where Batman would say to Robin, it's 10 of them against 2 of us, odds slightly in our favor?
Uh-huh.
Well, that's the way it is to some extent. I'm not too worried that the liberals in this country outnumber the conservatives. There are even some liberals out there that believe in ethics and respect for the law. And these are the kinds of things that if people feel strongly about this country and they believe in justice and they believe in truth, then we will prevail.
Speaking of liberals, there was a liberal prosecutor that was working on Kenneth Starr's team, or Robert Fisk, during the Vince Foster investigation, and he got so frustrated, even though he's a liberal, he saw that everything wasn't right in that Vince Foster case, and he finally quit. Chris Ruddy was telling a story about that on the program here 2 weeks ago. But
well, that's right, and I've got to tell you is that we are nonpartisan, and we have Democrats on our staff too, conservative Democrats, and we have a third cousin of Mac McLarty who would never vote for Clinton and who thinks that this is terrible. So there are people out there, whatever your political persuasion, who view what went on with this administration and what is going on as criminal. There are good people who are Democrats. We don't see many of them on Capitol Hill, but there are some that are out there. The issue is not what people call themselves, but what's in their heart and what they believe is right and wrong and whether they're willing to stand up for it.
Okay, quickly, we just got a few more minutes. We wanted to go into Paula Jones. Now, A lot of people would think that this is just a private a private case between Paula Jones and the president, where supposedly there was an advance made by the president in a hotel room down in Arkansas while he was governor. But there's more to it than that. And you have a lawsuit, a class action suit, pertaining to Paula Jones and State Farm Insurance. Could you go into that quickly?
Well, the State Farm Insurance Company in Chubb paid the president's legal fees, and our client believes without a valid insurance policy, without timely notice being provided, and frankly, without being spent to dismiss the lawsuit, but simply to delay it after the elections, which isn't a proper use of policyholder money. So our client, on behalf of the class of State Farm policyholders, brought a lawsuit to have the money paid back because this was an improper use, in our client's view, of policyholder money. This was another example, we believe, of an attempt by a large special interest, in this case the insurance industry, to get money to the Clintons to try to influence them, because the insurance industry had several regulatory issues pending before the Clinton administration. This is the name of the game in Washington. Line the pockets of the politicians any which way you can, get by that influence, and further your business in that way. It is corrupt to the core. We are no different than countries like Italy, where money is simply put into an envelope and handed across a desk. We just simply have more elaborate systems of funneling that money. And as long as we leave these systems in place, we are on a slow erosion into the abyss of corruption. We've seen countries like Mexico and Brazil and Italy try and convict their prime ministers and presidents and throw them in prison. In our 222 years, we have never held a president accountable for corruption. And clearly, even by the law of averages, we must have had at least one corrupt president during that period. Yet, we delude ourselves into believing that our system is any less corrupt than other countries. And as long as we continue to live in that delusion and continue this slide into ethical, moral, and legal lack of ethics, this country is in serious, serious trouble.
You know, a lot of people say this latest scandal with Monica Lewinsky and the president, you hear a lot of interviews where the man on the street says, I don't care what he's doing in his bedroom, as long as the country's humming along and everyone's economically, everyone's in pretty good shape now. The unemployment rate's down. There's a lot of money on the streets. So what he's doing in his private business? But this isn't really private. It seems to me like he's shown a pattern over the years of doing this on public property, whether it be in the governor's mansion down in Arkansas or in the White House. But once again, though, we have to assume this until somebody's found guilty, and that seems like that's why they call him Slick Willie. He kind of slips out of these things because it never comes to an end.
Well, the reason it doesn't come to an end, and you know, I hate to keep sounding like a broken record, is because he's not held accountable. We're out there trying to hold him accountable, but when most of the country thinks it's okay, when the people are worshiping the golden calf, it's time for Moses to come down from Mount Sinai with the Ten Commandments, and that's what we're trying to do. We're not as bold as to equate ourselves with Moses or other biblical figures, but this happens in a civilization. It happens in a society when it gets out of synchronization with basic ethics. And when that happens, unless you have a spiritual revival, you will see over time, as occurred with the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, Nazi Germany, and others, that civilizations will collapse. And if the American people want to keep looking the other way, if they want to forget that in fact they put Bill Clinton in power and they are responsible for him there, and if they want to keep worshiping that golden calf, then they don't really have much time left, because this country will cease to exist.
Larry, quickly here, we spoke of Janet Reno earlier, the Attorney General. I call her the woman in red because she gave the order to gas the women and children down in Waco, Texas, there in the final onslaught against David Koresh and his followers, which ended in a fiery death for all of them. But anyways, Janet Reno's decision to pour the gas in there, and she was wearing a red dress that day when she said she did that. But anyway, you happened to run into her kind of off the record in a bar or somewhere after work one day. Can you tell the viewers what transpired between the two of you?
Well, this was bizarre. I went to a restaurant with some of our supporters, and two of our advisors, and Jana Reno walked in with two of her girlfriends, sat down next to us. And I walked over and I introduced myself. I said, Miss Reno, perhaps you've heard of me. My name is Larry Klayman. She grabbed my hand and she said, Larry, of course I've heard of you. You're doing a great job. Keep it up. And I figured maybe she didn't recognize me. So I came back to her and I said, you know that I'm the one who uncovered John Wong, and Judicial Watch is quite an adversary of your Justice Department. And she said, I know that, Larry, and keep up the good work, and thanked me. Now, she is a tremendous actress. She obviously is not someone who thinks fondly of me or of Judicial Watch. We have had her attorneys sanctioned on 2 occasions. We have continuously pointed out how her Justice Department is corrupt, top to bottom, and is not doing its job. But this is the kind of insincerity that exists in Washington. And I don't understand where she was coming from. She was not inebriated with alcohol, but obviously she was an actress. And unfortunately, the time is not for acting. The time is for real people to do something about the problem we have here in Washington.
Either that or she's being blackmailed or some way beholden to the Clintons, and she's looking for somebody like Judicial Watch to clean the nest out of there.
Well, that may be. Perhaps she's a damsel in distress.
Right. Okay, Larry, well...
Distress.
Well, once again, the P.O. Box number there is 44444, and if anyone wants to write to Judicial Watch, here's a copy of their... that's the October issue. Here's a copy of the... Roy can get a close-up of that. We'll show a copy of their newsletter. And how often does the newsletter come out, Larry?
Well, it comes out every 2 months, and we have a new issue that's coming out soon. And if people want to get a complimentary copy or want to join Judicial Watch or contribute, you can call me at toll-free number 888-JW-ETHIC, E-T-H-I-C, 888-JW-ETHIC, E-T-H-I-C. If you call that number, it won't cost you anything. We'll put you on our mailing list. And you can decide whether you want to help us or not, and whether you want to join us and become part of our legal militia, so to speak.
All right, and we're showing a picture of the Judicial Watch, and this latest issue had 8 pages in it. That was January to February, and it's full of tells all the different. It talks about the different lawsuits that are going on right now. As a matter of fact, in this January-February issue, it talks a little bit about Chris Ruddy's book, about the blackout in there. It shows Ron Brown hugging Yasser Arafat. Probably a little bit of money exchanged hands there. But Judicial Watch is a 501c3, so anybody viewing this program can donate, and it is 100% deductible. And that seems to be a little unusual, that we can actually donate money to an organization that could possibly, if everything falls right and these lawsuits come to fruition, could possibly hasten the downfall of the President of the United States.
Yes.
And it seems like they would somehow try and stop a 501c3 from doing that, Larry. It seems like they'd want to say separation of church and state or something.
Well, you can't be scared of the Clinton administration. They have tried to intimidate people with using the IRS and others, but you have to do what you think's right, and we're not in this to remove Clinton from power. We're in it to bring about justice. If he's removed as a result of that, so be it. And we are in this for the long haul. We'll always be here. After 17 years of practice, now 21 in my part, I have found my calling, and that is to be the people's advocate, because the people do need lawyers, not lawyers who are there for making money, but lawyers who are there making change to try to bring this country back. I felt that after 17 years of being a trial lawyer, I could take that and use it positively. I'm not proud of my profession. Frankly, I think the legal profession has hit rock bottom. But I want to use what I have learned to ask the court system to make the change in this country, and we've shown that we can make a difference. When President Clinton leaves office, and hopefully sooner rather than later, we will continue, because there will always be corruption in this country, and we have to limit that corruption, no matter who's in charge, Democrat, or Republican.
Fred, my co-host here, wanted to say something real quick.
Congratulations, Larry. I get your Judicial Watch. I haven't been able to contribute, but I've sent in the questionnaires.
Thanks, Fred, and it's my pleasure. And I know that some people can, some people can't, but whether you can or you can't, you're still our friend. And we hope to have as many people who know about us and support us and wish us well as possible. One of the nice things about what I'm doing is that this really is a work from the heart, and I really get a kick out of people who say nice things and appreciate what we're doing.
I'm going to be bringing this up before the Knights of Columbus and our local council tomorrow night and give you a little credit there.
Thanks, Fred.
You know, Larry, it's I suppose parts of this job are fun and parts aren't fun. I suppose it's fun to see George Stephanopoulos under the bright lights there kind of squirming a little bit when you're asking him questions. He seems to be kind of a cocky character, and so I suppose that's a little bit fun. But on the other hand, this is really serious business. We're dealing with the very essence of what the United States is made up of, and government and freedom and justice, and it takes people like Larry Klayman and Judicial Watch and the fine organization there to stand there in the gap and do the thing and do these things that other people either are afraid to do or can't afford to do. So we can be a part of this, and we can have you out front there in the trenches, but it does take time and money, and like you say, that deposition today probably cost around $10,000 with all the time and investigation that people don't see. They just see the end result of 4 or 5 hours of videotape. And so we really do appreciate your hard work out there and willing to stand in the gap and take the heat and take the attacks, and we really appreciate what you're doing out there, Larry.
Well, I thank you for that, and anything that's worthwhile obviously takes a lot of hard work. The attacks won't stop. It is a difficult thing, and I might say that I'm going to try to put Mr. Stephanopoulos' deposition up on interactive video. John Wong's is running on our website at www.judicialwatch.org, because if you look at the demeanor, that's what lawyers call the way the witness is handling himself. If you look at the kinds of comments that are being made, if you look at the claiming of lack of knowledge, if you look at how questions are responded to and the insults that were leveled against me for 5 hours today, in a nutshell, you'll see the Clinton administration in brief. You'll see a complete lack of respect for the law, ethics, and, in my view, morality. I'll let people judge for themselves. But this is somebody who was at the pinnacle of power, who was the president's closest advisor. Yet this is someone who absolutely has no respect for the legal system, much less anything else.
Well, thanks a lot for your hard work. Now, are you going to go back and depose him again, or is it all done?
Well, we're going to ask the court to bring him back. He did not answer certain questions. He took documents out of the White House, which he shouldn't have. He did not produce the documents which we requested, and he refused to answer questions about who he talked to concerning this FBI file matter. So we are confident that we'll have him back for yet round 2.
I guess just briefly, I wanted to ask you the same thing I asked Chris Ruddy 2 weeks ago. This is my own personal opinion, but it seems to me like there's a kind of a shadowy group that seems to mop up after the Clintons and take care of the dirty work, and it seems like this group could possibly go back all the way back to the days when Hillary was chumming around with the Black Panthers and Bill Clinton was chumming around with the anti-war demonstrators. But is there a group, kind of a group of plumbers like Nixon had, that are doing the dirty work in the background and mopping up and taking care of business and cleaning up and threatening?
Well, we know from recent press reports that there are a number of private investigators out there that are investigating people, presumably with the intention of smearing adversaries of this administration. We know that over 30-some people have perished. Now James McDougal, according to reports, by a heart attack. There are a lot of circumstantial pieces of evidence out there about people who had their lives ruined, smeared, or are no longer here on this earth. And, of course, it remains to be seen who was responsible for that. And these are things that we need to look into to see whether or not, indeed, there is a type of cabal out there, a type of group of individuals who are bringing down adversaries of this administration. This is something which can't be discounted. We have to remember that these things have happened in other countries. In the country of Italy, for instance, the previous Prime Minister, Giulio Andreotti, has been indicted for murder. This does happen in the real world, and to simply dismiss it, to say these things could not happen in the United States, I think is to live in a dream world.
Well, I think we're in more perilous times than we were back in the pre-Kennedy assassination days of Camelot and the euphoric era of the Eisenhower administration, those 8 years of peace and safety there. Larry, we're out of time. We really do appreciate you being with us tonight, and hopefully we can have you on again on another occasion. We're going to tell the folks again after we let you go here about the address and your phone number. Keep up the good work, Larry, and keep your powder dry.
Okay, thank you, and it's my pleasure. I thank you for having me.
All right, thanks a lot, Larry.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye, Fred.
Okay, Fred, well, there we have it. No, it's not that time yet, Fred. You're a little bit premature, as they say in the...
2 minutes ahead.
A little premature there, Freddie boy. Okay, so...
I'm going to call the meeting to order.
Judicial Watch. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Contributions received from individuals, foundations, and corporations are tax deductible to the extent allowed by law. And as you heard from Larry Klayman, it takes upwards of $10,000 per deposition, and he has had some very serious and important depositions to get to the bottom of over 14 different lawsuits that are going on by Judicial Watch to bring to light violations and corruption within the Clinton administration that are on an ongoing basis. And just a few of those were the Paula Jones scandal, the campaign finance scandals, and the Filegate case, and the Travelgate. I don't know if he's filed any cases there, but you know, there's some we didn't get into, Fred, quickly, were the case about Webb Hubbell.
Yeah.
The Los Angeles Airport Authority paid Webb Hubbell for legal fees when he was under investigation and had resigned from the Department of Justice. Another case involved Judicial Watch's efforts through the Freedom of Information Act to get to the bottom of political motivations behind Attorney General Janet Reno's refusal to appoint an independent counsel to investigate campaign finance-related matters, despite overwhelming evidence of the need for such an appointment. Judicial Watch has also filed a lawsuit to obtain the documents that will explain the Clinton Justice Department's misconduct in 3 different matters: Ruby Ridge, Waco, and the Richard Jewell Olympic bombing cover-ups. Furthermore, Judicial Watch has filed suit to challenge the implementation of the Family Responsibility Act provisions on abstinence education by the Clinton administration. And lastly, Judicial Watch filed 3 related cases on behalf of Accuracy in Media to uncover documentation behind the Clinton administration's investigation into the death of former White House Deputy Counsel Vince Foster. So Judicial Watch has been very busy out there, Fred. Yeah. And you know, one of these people that they're investigating, Fred, is a group called Poly Technology. It's from China, called Poly Technologies Limited. It's a wholly owned subsidiary of the People's Liberation Army, the Communist Chinese Army, and this company illegally shipped 2,000 AK-47s and other automatic weapons into the United States. The owner of the company was Wang Jun, a friend of Charlie Tree and White House guest of President Clinton. So here we got Clinton out there running around talking about getting all the AK-47s off the market, and then he's hobnobbing with people in the White House, taking money from the very people that are bringing those guns into the country, Fred.
Yes.
All right, so want to thank you once again for tuning in to the Old Cow Report. I've been your host, Chuck Lee. With me has been my rusty, trusty fried chicken king and carp king over here, the carp king of the Midwest, carp sausage king there, Freddie the true Stafford. And of course, this program's been brought to you by the Royal Order of the Raccoons, Loyal Order, and Flavin' Pops. Thanks again. We'll see you again right here next time on the Old Cow Report.
The meeting is over now.
Adios, amigos and amigas.